killing of two New York police officers over the weekend has rattled law enforcement and communities nationwide. Rank and file officers all over America are being told to take a load of precautions, such as avoiding inflammatory social media posts, not making arrests unless necessary.
We have reached dangerous times in the relationship between law enforcement and the general public here in America. Cops are targets now more than ever before. The one thing desperately needed is leadership. The one thing no one needs at this time is arrogance. So let the conversation begin. It's a pleasure to welcome into MidPoint, Chairperson of the Department of Law, Police Science, and Criminal Justice Administration at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York, Dr. Maria Haberfeld joins us today. Doctor, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Doctor, is it not fair to say we have the president of the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association, the PBA, Pat Lynch, who is in a screaming match right now, a virtual screaming match with the Mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio. The two are going back and forth. With regard to the fact that these two officers have not even been buried yet, and certain people are saying they will continue to protest, isn't it time to ratchet down the rhetoric a little on both sides, especially the police side, and just try to bring this down to a dull roar?
Well, it's interesting that it's always the police who are supposed to expect to display the restraint and behave in an adult way, so to speak. But the truth is that there is nothing more extreme in the history of any democracy than the member of the public feeling that they can kill police officers or advocating for killing of police officers. Policing as a profession is an extremely dangerous profession, not just from the standpoint of actual physical casualties, but also psychological casualties. Police officers have a lower lifespan than any other member of the community. They're prone to various types of diseases that other members are not, alcoholism, depression. And yet again, we are constantly requiring or expecting of them to behave in a way that the rest of us don't feel that we need to behave. I would, certainly say, I think it's the time for the politicians to take and the lead and show leadership in this situation.
Okay, let me stop you there if I might, because again, you're getting right into where I was talking about, and I don't want to be taken incorrectly here, because I am in fully support of police officers around the country. Many of them are my friends. I have known and worked with them for many years, and I think that 99% of the police in this country are good, honest, hard-working people. So let me make that very clear. But when you say the adult in the room, and you're right, the politicians need to shut the trap as well, as do the activists like Al Sharpton and others of his ilk. But with regard to Pat Lynch, the PBA president, shouldn't they be, maybe, the adults in the room? Bring it back a little bit, because it's just dangerous right now to keep up this level of hate when you've got people traveling from Baltimore to New York to kill cops.
It's dangerous, but I truly understand what's happening in Pat Lynch head and in his environment. It's been a year of extreme stress, and for police department here in New York City, I think that the police officer did not feel that they have the support of the mayor. The mayor is the one who appoints the commissioner. The mayor is indirectly the boss, so to speak, of the police officers. If you work under somebody who does not appreciate what you do, to the contrary, takes it to the media and hints to misconduct on the part of police officers, there's only that much that police officers or the leaders of their unions can take. And, at a certain point, again, we are dealing with human beings. Police officers have the same fear, the same stressors that others are entitled to.
Absolutely, and I want to interrupt you because we have to take a break here in a moment, but your final comment, about 30 seconds here before we take the break. You mentioned the mayor. Is it not fair to say that Mayor Bill de Blasio bumbled and stumbled his way through this and handled it about as badly as you possibly could?
I couldn't agree more.
With regard to that then, how does he back up and get the cops back on his side, or has that ship sailed?
I think that ship has sailed because we're talking over a year of bashing police performance in New York City by the mayor.
Is it possible then for the cops actually to do anything that they are asked to do by the mayor at this point, or do you see them still continuing to turn their back?
Well, at the end of the day, police officers are, especially NYPD here, and I teach them for 14 years. I have a special program for them. They are the ultimate professionals. At the end of the day, when they're less emotional, they will continue to do what they need to do. But it doesn't mean that that their feelings will change.
All right, if you will, please, doctor, stand by just a moment. Dr. Maria Haberfeld returns with us after a short break. We're going to turn to those blaming police for every ill of society and the reality of where this discussion has to go before anything is solved. And later, the Ebola lies, what your government's not telling you. On MidPoint. Let's welcome back to MidPoint, Chairperson of the Department of Law, Police Science, and Criminal Justice Administration at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York, Dr. Maria Haberfeld. Doctor, let's talk about moving forward at this point. The cops are already under assault. We know that there's targets on their backs. And as a matter of fact, there was a story out today that talked about the killer of the cops in New York who was using a traffic application on his cell phone that tracks law enforcement's movements. He was actually able to see since December the 4th where cops were in the New York City area. This is frightening. Cops are being targeted. So knowing this, knowing that every police officer right now has to have a little bit of a hair trigger, knowing what's going on, how do you start making the general public trust you?
Well, it's not something that can happen overnight. We in the criminal justice community or criminologists, we rely on various criminological theories to explain behaviors of the public. One of the theories I would like to address is the labeling theory. Once you label somebody deviant, they become deviant in the eyes of the general public. The police have been labeled as deviant. I'm not making any judgmental statement right now about Mr. Gardner's case or Mr. Brown's case, but even if there was some error of judgment there, it was an error of judgment of a few police officers, not thousands upon thousands of police officers. Yet, the entire police department was labeled as deviant. And a number of cases that people are citing are a fraction of statistically insignificant examples of police misconduct or alleged misconduct. Nobody talks about millions upon millions of calls for service that police officers respond to and handle in a professional way.
However, you will admit that one death of one innocent person by one cop sets everything off at that point. There's nothing statistically insignificant about that.
Statistically, it will still be insignificant. Morally, it will be very significant because every person's life matters. But we have to look at police profession like any other profession. Policing is not an error-free environment. We know it for decades. We know it for hundreds of years. When people are authorized to use coercive force, errors of judgment will happen. But the question is, do we need to demonize the entire profession because of an error of judgment or alleged error of judgment?
Then let's not demonize the entire department, as you just said here, but let's look at it this way. In Milwaukee, there was a white officer who killed a black man there. Recently, the investigation of the Justice Department, they're going to look into it, but locally they said there was no reason to charge him. The officer's been fired. But it's now come to light that he wasn't properly trained. He did conduct an illegal search. So doesn't this say that police departments across the country have to get out in front of this? They got to better train their people. We've had people who've been former cops who said right on this show that it's sloppy at many times. So don't the cops, every police department, have to better train their people and make sure that they're not making these casual mistakes?
Again, this is something I devoted my life to. I'm a training person. I've written books on training, articles. I study it all the time for decades. It's not the police department that's supposed to train police officers better. It's the politician who should allocate additional resources to police departments.
Well, wait a minute. You're saying the police department shouldn't train them? Yes, they do. No, wait a minute. They do have to train them, correct?
They do have to train them, but they have very limited resources that are allocated by the politicians for training. Your audience needs to, and your listeners need to understand that 90%, around 90% of police agencies' budgets go into salaries. So what is left for training and equipment is a fraction of the budget. Average training of a police officer in the United States is about 15 weeks. To me, It's irresponsible that any democratic society would allow police officers to become authorized users of deadly force after 15 weeks of training. But again, who allocates the money for training? These are the local politicians.
So are politicians, and we got about 40 seconds left, are politicians then basically looking for a scapegoat for their own mistakes?
The politicians should understand that if they're not going to allocate additional resources to police departments, everybody will become a scapegoat.
And fair to say that with the militarization of citizens who are carrying more guns these days, a little more help is needed, correct?
A lot of help is needed.
A lot of help is needed. All right. Dr. I'll tell you, we've opened up a lot of different areas of discussion here, certainly, and we're going to continue to have this discussion because, quite frankly, this is something that needs to go forward and cannot stop right here with one instance in New York City. I will look forward to having you on the show again and talking about this. I want to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'll look forward to the next time we speak.
Thank you to you too.
All right, Dr. Maria Haberfeld joining us from John Jay College in New York. Break, and we are back with the latest computerization of your medical world, one that could actually make things easier for doctor and patient. My God, think about that for a moment. Things easier between doctor and patient. Of course, there really won't be a doctor there. We'll explain when we continue on MidPoint.